Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about single joint exercises and why I prefer to use those terms single joint and multi joint, which are the exercise science terms, and you will never ever hear me call movements compound or isolation. And it's kind of funny because people say that oftentimes. They're like, Blaha promotes big compound lifts. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't believe they even exist. All right, what's a compound lift? What's that supposed to mean? People are like, well, an exercise that works multiple muscles. So you mean a curl? You mean a tricep extension? You mean a lateral raise? Because those all work multiple muscles, right? So everything's a compound exercise. Literally every single thing that you do is a compound movement, so it's kind of silly to use the term. And isolation movements don't even exist. There is no such thing. It's a weird bodybuilder idea. So the thing that we want to look at is, the fact that a lot of your really good single joint exercises actually do work multiple muscles. And you can see that to some extent with arm movements, such as a really strict J-arm press like Mike is doing up above. Is it a tricep dominant exercise? You bet. Does it still work a lot of the major muscles of the forearm? Yes, it does. Does it potentially work the anterior deltoids? Yeah, to some extent. So that's an example. Whereas in something like a really strict concentration curl or a really strict elbows only tricep extension work less. So therefore we could say that maybe they're not even as good of movements. Okay. And there's kind of your point. We're going to get to that in a moment when we discuss some of these other exercises. The point that needs to be made here is that a lot of the more strict movements, when you look at them on EMGs, actually seem to activate less of the primary mover. So in other words, the more you attempt to isolate a muscle, unless it brings in a unique function, you may actually be working the muscle less. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying the potential is there. But those are perfect examples, because when you look at a big barbell curl versus a strict concentration curl to where your arm is locked in, the EMG just lights up higher on the barbell curl, the standing barbell curl. Okay, it does. An EMG isn't everything, but just something to factor in, that you're not necessarily doing yourself any favors. But look at a lot of the movements that my lifters are doing and myself are doing in this video clip. All right, you're going to see various delt exercises, front raises, lateral raises, rear delt flies. Okay, hanging leg raise, reverse hyperextensions. These are all movements I prescribe very, very frequently. Well, what's one of the things that they all have in common? They all work multiple major muscles. Every single one of them. And by work multiple of them, meaning that they are primary movers, they're not secondary. Right? It's not so low that you're not getting a growth stimulus. I mean, look at the front raises. All right, what's the data on that show? They show a very large amount of pectoral activation. When it's looked at in the lab, a front raise with a dumbbell or plate doesn't just work the delts, but it works multiple heads of the delts. Works the front delt, works the side delts, works the upper traps. Okay, all of those get enough stimulus to actually cause growth. Now, granted, the delt's one muscle and very few things work all three heads. Okay, but it's working the traps. What about the pecs? I'm seeing EMG showing that it is well into the hypertrophy stimulus range. Your chest can grow as a result. Lateral raise to the side. All three heads of the delt. Okay, that's already significant. Upper traps, to some extent middle traps. Okay, they all get worked. Reverse flies. Rear delt dominant works the upper trap, middle trap, lower traps to some extent, rhomboids. Some studies have even found some lat activation. Okay. But at least two, maybe three, actually at least three major muscles, possibly a fourth. These are single joint movements. They can literally be used to grow multiple muscles. Now, people say, well, I thought you said that delt work isn't always necessary. Yeah, for people who don't have lagging delts, it may not be necessary. Your rowing and your pressing can technically work all three heads, although maybe not optimally. But yeah, certainly they do get worked. For a novice, they may be more than enough for maximum growth, if volumes are sufficient. With these movements, volumes can be lower, but then they carry over also, don't they? Some of these movements are working pecs, some of them are working the entire upper back. So they're hitting just as many big muscles as these bigger movements, just more bias in a different direction. They're also easier on stimulus to fatigue. That's a big deal. They're easier to recover from. It's still working these. So they fit very nicely into a program to where you're trying to maximize overall development, which we're often trying to do as strength athletes. I'm not talking about bodybuilding. I don't care about bodybuilding. I'm not interested. But don't strength athletes have to maximize hypertrophy? Of course we do. We have to. We have to be chasing size just as much as the bodybuilder. People say, well, where's the trade-off? We don't chase balance. We don't chase symmetry. But we're chasing the same amount of size. We have to. We have to be just as big. These reverse hypers, it's just a hip hinge. It's a single joint exercise. What does it work? Primary movers, lower back erectors, glutes, hamstrings. The glute activation is phenomenal, by the way. So the reverse hypers, they're a big movement. It works three of the biggest muscle groups in the body, three very big muscles, particularly glutes. Glutes are massive. Works all of them. It also works secondary muscles to some extent, such as adductors. Okay. Works your grip, but it's a single joint movement. Every one of these things that I'm naming, and there are others, stricter good mornings are a single joint movement, but my God, how many muscles do they work? But again, all these shoulder exercises, perfect example. I mean, even arm exercises to some extent. There's almost always some deltoid involvement, some shoulder involvement, forearm involvement for single joint arm movements. But all these shoulder movements are perfect examples. Every one of them work multiple muscles enough to cause measurable hypertrophy and growth. There's a very pronounced training response in multiple muscles, but they're single joint exercises. Okay, so this idea that people have that single joint exercises do not work large numbers of muscles is just simply not based on reality. It's just not. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.